The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie is the most talked about case in America right now. Type her name into any search engine and you will drown in results. Press conferences, FBI updates, Ring doorbell footage analyzed frame by frame, ransom notes, Bitcoin wallets, DNA profiles that match nobody in the system. Everyone has a theory. Everyone thinks they know what happened. I have spent the last 3 weeks going through every press conference, every leaked document, every interview, every public record I could find connected to this case. Court filings, property records, Google Trends data, banned pages, criminal background checks. I have read things that made me stop and reread them 3 times because I did not believe what I was looking at. The story most people are following right now is a straightforward one. A stranger targeted an elderly woman, broke into her home in the middle of the night, and took her. That is the story the sheriff is telling. That is the story the headlines are selling. And if you only look at the surface, it holds together. But underneath that surface, there is another story. One built on timelines that do not add up, relationships that raise questions nobody wants to ask, and a trail of coincidences so specific and so layered that calling them coincidences starts to feel like a choice. I am not here to accuse anyone. I am here to show you what I've found. And by the end of this video, the version of this case you thought you understood is not going to look the same. It starts with a man walking backward. On January 23, 2026, a video appeared on the Ring Neighbors app. A man, late at night, walking backward up a residential driveway in the Catalina foothills. Not stumbling, not drunk, walking backward with deliberate, measured steps, keeping his back flat against the camera, his chin tucked to his chest. Now I need you to understand why walking backward matters. Consumer security cameras like Ring and Nest do not record around the clock. They sleep. They rely on passive infrared sensors to detect body heat and motion. When someone steps into the frame, the sensor has to wake up the processor. The lens adjusts to the low light. The Wi-Fi establishes a handshake with the server. That process takes 1 to 2 seconds. If you walk forward, that first second captures your face as you approach. But by walking backward, the suspect ensures that during those critical wake-up seconds, the camera captures nothing but the back of a hoodie and a backpack. By the time the lens is fully recording, his face is already shielded. He is physically hacking the camera's lag time with his body. This is not the behavior of a random prowler. This is the behavior of someone who has studied how the technology works, someone who has done research. And here is the part that stopped me cold. The backpack he is wearing in this January 23rd footage is visually identical to the one seen at Nancy Guthrie's house 9 days later. The Ozark Trail 25-liter hiker pack, with those distinct reflective safety strips. Same bag, different house, 6.5 miles away. In what can only be described as a dress rehearsal. The location matters, 6.5 miles from Nancy's home. In forensic geography, this is what investigators call a buffer zone. Far enough from the target to avoid any immediate connection if he gets caught, but close enough to replicate the exact environment. Both locations are in the Catalina foothills. Both feature isolated desert homes with long driveways. Both have the same dark sky ordinances, meaning minimal street lighting and deep pools of darkness. He was not picking a random house to test. He was selecting a simulator. And when a dog barked, look at what he did. He fled. But he maintained his backward orientation. He suppressed the biological reflex to turn toward the sound. He would rather trip and fall than give the camera a single frame of his face. That level of discipline does not come from panic. It comes from preparation. Now compare that man to the man on Nancy's porch 9 days later. On January 23rd, the suspect is terrified, hunched, paranoid about every pixel. But on February 1st, he is not walking backward anymore. He is walking forward. He is calm. He saunters up to the front door with a level of confidence that is genuinely unsettling. And then he does something that made me watch the footage 4 times. He reaches out and taps the camera lens. Twice. Casual. Rhythmic. Like someone checking a microphone. Like someone tapping a piece of furniture they walk past every single day. 9 days ago, he was so afraid of the camera that he walked in reverse to avoid it. Now he is reaching out and physically touching it, taunting it. What happened in those 9 days? The answer is simple. The January 23rd video was his test, his classroom. He was the student, and because the police did not show up at his door the next morning, he learned the most dangerous lesson a criminal can learn. He learned he was invisible. By the time he arrived at Nancy's house, he was no longer testing, he was executing. Drop a comment right now and tell me what side you are on after watching this video, because the details I am about to walk you through have split the internet in half. Some people think the man I am about to name is a grieving son-in-law. Others think he is the most dangerous person in this investigation. By the end, you are going to have to choose. Let us get into it. There is a house in Tucson, Arizona, 4 miles from Nancy Guthrie's front door. A 10-minute drive with zero traffic at 2 in the morning. In that house lives Annie Guthrie, Nancy's oldest daughter, and her husband Tommaso Cioni. Annie is a poet, a jeweler. She works at the University of Arizona Poetry Center. In a 2013 interview, she called her husband her greatest teacher and described him as a great manifester. She said he writes poetry with his lifestyle. Remember that phrase, a great manifester, because it is going to sit differently by the end of this video. Tommaso Cioni is a 50-year-old science teacher. He has taught advanced placement biology at a charter school in Tucson for over 15 years. He was born in San Giovanni Valdarno, a small town in Tuscany. He moved to Arizona in 2006. He plays bass in a local band called Early Black. He makes homemade pasta. He forages for mushrooms. He studies lizards. By every public account, he is a quiet, unremarkable man living an unremarkable life in the desert. He is also the last person to see Nancy Guthrie alive. On the evening of January 31st, Nancy spent the evening at Annie and Tommaso's house. Dinner, games, family time. Now here's the first thing I need you to pay attention to. There are conflicting reports about what happened next. Some sources say Tommaso drove Nancy home and confirmed she was safely inside at approximately 9:50 p.m. Other sources say Annie drove her home. Others say it was both of them. The story has changed depending on who is telling it and when. In a case where every minute matters, the fact that we still do not have a consistent answer about who was the last person to physically see Nancy alive is not a small detail. It is a foundational one. At 1:47 a.m., the Nest camera system at Nancy's home was manually disconnected. If we take the 9:50 p.m. drop-off, that is, a gap of 3 hours and 57 minutes, call it 4 hours. 4 hours is an eternity. It is more than enough time to drive home, wait for the neighborhood to fall asleep, change into a disguise, drive back, park at a safe distance, walk to the house, execute the plan, and be back in your own bed before anyone wakes up. No confirmed alibi for Tommaso during that window has been made public. No confirmed alibi for Annie either. They live in the same house. Whatever alibi one has, the other provides. Think about that. Now let us talk about what happened on that porch, because the body language is where this case cracks open. The intruder did not behave like a stranger. Body language experts and former federal agents have pointed out that the suspect moves through the space with the subconscious confidence of someone who has been there many times before. He does not search for the camera. He walks directly to it. He does not hesitate at the front door. He knows the layout of the porch, the position of the potted plant he uses to cover the lens, the exact spot where the camera sits. In criminal profiling, this is called ownership behavior. It is a state of mind where the perpetrator feels they have a legitimate right to be in that specific space. He does not act like a thief in a stranger's home. He acts like an owner in his own backyard. That rhythmic tap on the camera lens is not a calculated criminal move. It is a habitual gesture, the kind of thing you do to an object you see every single day. Now ask yourself this. Who else would have the mental blueprint of Nancy's home burned into their brains so deeply that they could navigate it in the dark without a single moment of hesitation? Who knew where every camera was? Who knew she did not have an active Nest subscription? Who knew her routine, her bedtime, her medications, the layout of her entry points? Tommaso Cioni had dinner at that house regularly. He helped Nancy with errands. He and Annie assisted with property management. He had been walking through that front door for nearly 2 decades. If there is anyone on earth whose subconscious muscle memory would produce that exact pattern of movement on that porch, it is the man who was standing on it 4 hours earlier. But this is where the case takes a turn that I cannot stop thinking about. Because if Tommaso Cioni is one of the most suspicious people in this investigation, he is also one of the most paradoxical. Look at the suspect's gear. a $22 ski mask from a sporting goods store, in Tucson, in the desert, where it does not snow. How many people are buying ski masks in Tucson in January? That purchase alone stands out in any transaction database. A $10 pack of nitrile gloves, a $20 Ozark Trail backpack from Walmart with reflective safety strips that glow like a neon sign under infrared light, and a belly band holster strapped over a thick jacket, flopping around loosely, worn completely wrong. A former Secret Service agent said no one with even a single day of tactical training would wear a firearm like that. The whole kit cost less than $100. It screams incompetence. Now compare that image to the man we are scrutinizing. Tommaso Cioni is not a drifter. He is not uneducated. He teaches advanced placement biology. To teach at that level, you need a high degree of organization, critical thinking, and an understanding of cause and effect. You have to be intelligent. You have to be methodical. So the defense from his supporters is loud and clear. Tommaso is too smart to be this stupid. But I want you to flip that on its head. Step into the mind of a highly intelligent person who is planning a crime they do not want traced back to them. If you are a smart, logical science teacher and you want to kidnap someone without getting caught, what is the number one thing you need? You need the police to look for someone who is not you. So what do? You create a character. You perform a role. You deliberately buy the cheapest, most incorrect gear you can find at a big box store. You wear the holster wrong on purpose. You want the FBI profilers to sit in a room and say they are looking for an addict or a transient. So they stop looking at the respected educator with the master's degree. This concept is called calculated incompetence. And if that is what happened here, we have to admit something terrifying. It is working. It is working because right now we are debating it. The clumsiness is not a mistake. It might be the most sophisticated part of the entire plan. And there is one more layer to the gear that nobody is talking about enough. The gloves. Black nitrile gloves. Not leather tactical gloves. Not latex surgical gloves. Nitrile. These are the gloves used in laboratories, food service, and home repair. Now think about who uses nitrile gloves every single day as part of their job. Biology teachers. Tommaso Cioni runs AP biology labs where students handle specimens, chemicals, and biological material. Nitrile gloves are standard equipment in his classroom. Having a box of them in his garage is not suspicious. It is expected. And that is exactly the problem. The ordinariness of the gloves makes them invisible. The suspect also knew there were additional Nest cameras beyond the doorbell. The sheriff confirmed investigators are trying to recover footage from other cameras on the property, but Nancy did not have subscriptions for those either. Whoever entered that house knew the entire camera layout and knew that none of them were storing footage. That is not information you get from a Google image search. That is information you get from being inside the home, from helping set the cameras up, from hearing Nancy say she did not want to pay for the monthly subscription, from being family. Now I need to talk about something that very few people have connected to this case, and I want you to listen carefully because the timing is what matters. In February 2024, almost exactly 1 year before Nancy disappeared, Annie Guthrie published a book called Mostly What God Does. In that book, she described a childhood tradition. Every summer, her older cousin Terry would orchestrate what the family called a kidnapping of Savannah and her sister Annie. The cousin would wake them up before dawn, pile them into a station wagon, and drive them from Tucson to Phoenix. Along the way, the girls would call Nancy from a payphone and say, "Mom, Cousin Terry kidnapped us." And Nancy would play along. She would pretend to be shocked. She would promise to come get them in a few days. I am going to say that again. Annie Guthrie published a book in which she described her family playing kidnapping games. From the same house in Tucson, with her sister Annie, and their mother Nancy played along on the phone. 1 year later, the game became real. I am not drawing a connection. I am telling you what is written in a published book that anyone could buy on Amazon for the last 2 years. You can decide what to do with it. Now let us follow the money, because in every investigation, money is either a motive or a red herring. And in this case, the numbers tell a very specific story. Nancy's home in the Catalina foothills is valued at approximately $1 million. She has owned it since 1985. Annie and Tommaso's home, 2 miles away, is valued at roughly $650,000. Tommaso's income as a high school teacher puts his household well below 7 figures. Meanwhile, Savannah Guthrie's estimated net worth is $40 million. She earns millions annually from NBC. The ransom demand was for $6 million in Bitcoin. That number was not random. Someone calculated it. Someone who understood the financial architecture of this family. Someone who knew what Savannah could afford and what would sound believable. An unverified document surfaced online showing that on May 16, 2025, Tommaso Cioni signed a durable power of attorney, giving his wife Annie control over all of his financial, personal, and property-related affairs. Legal experts will tell you this is routine for real estate closings, and they are right. Power of attorney documents are filed every day, but the timing, May 2025, that is 8 months before Nancy disappeared, and it falls in the exact same window as the earliest Google searches for Nancy's home address. Someone in Arizona was Googling Nancy's address starting in March of 2025. By May, Tommaso was reorganizing his legal affairs. By June, the address was searched again. By December, someone searched Savannah Guthrie's salary from Tucson. Does that mean the power of attorney is connected? I cannot say that definitively, but I can say that in the spring and summer of 2025, while someone in Arizona was researching Nancy Guthrie's home, Tommaso Cioni was putting his legal house in order. And if you were planning an operation that might result in your arrest or your need to disappear, transferring control of your assets to your spouse is not routine. It is preparation. And Annie is the one who ends up holding everything. That brings us to Annie. And this is where I need to be very careful, because Annie Guthrie is not someone the media has focused on. But the investigation has. Her vehicle was towed and impounded as part of this case. Ashley Banfield reported this on her podcast, citing a law enforcement source she described as very connected and highly regarded. The sheriff later said processing the car was standard investigative practices. But think about what impounding means. You do not impound a family member's car in a stranger abduction. You impound a vehicle when you believe it may have been used in the commission of a crime, or when it may contain forensic evidence. What did they find in that vehicle? What were they looking for? The public has not been told. Investigators searched Annie and Tommaso's home multiple times. They photographed rooms. They removed security cameras from the property. And here's the detail that made me pause. They examined the septic tank. CNN affiliate KNXV filmed investigators probing the tank with a long stick and using flashlights to peer inside. You do not search a septic tank unless you are looking for something that someone tried to destroy or conceal. Annie and Tommaso both went dark publicly after the first week. Reporter Brian Enton, who has been on the ground in Tucson since the beginning, reported that Tommaso had not been seen in almost a week. He said the last time cameras caught him was outside the house with Annie, in a car together. Then silence. Both of them, at the same time. And remember the conflicting stories about who dropped Nancy off. Some reports say Tommaso, some say Annie, some say both. In an investigation where the last person to see the victim alive is always the first person examined, that inconsistency is not nothing. It is either confusion or coordination, and investigators know the difference. Now, we need to talk about something that makes the online community very uncomfortable. Tommaso Cioni's inner circle. He plays bass in a Tucson band called Early Black. One of his bandmates is a man named Dominic Evans. Court records from Pima County show that Evans has been charged with felony burglary, robbery, theft, and embezzlement. When Ashley Banfield named Tommaso as a possible suspect, internet investigators immediately started vetting his social circle. Evans was the first name to surface. A SWAT team later raided a location in the area connected to the broader investigation. Think about what that criminal record means in the context of this case. Burglary, robbery. These are not petty offenses. These are crimes that require entering properties and taking things from people. If Tommaso needed someone who understood the mechanics of breaking into a home, someone who had done it before, someone who would not freeze at the front door, he would not have to look very far. He would just have to look at the man standing next to him at band practice. I want to be clear. There is no confirmed evidence linking Dominic Evans to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. But the proximity matters. The criminal background matters. And the fact that he exists in Tommaso's immediate social circle matters, because the sheriff has publicly said he has not ruled out an accomplice, and the forensic evidence supports that. The FBI found 2 separate DNA profiles, one on a glove discarded 2 miles from the house, one inside the home itself. They do not match each other. They do not match anyone in Nancy's family, and they do not match anyone in CODIS. 2 DNA profiles, 2 locations, 2 people. That is not speculation, that is mathematics. Something left genetic material inside Nancy's home, and something different left genetic material inside a glove along a potential escape route. If there are 2 people involved in this crime, then every theory about a lone wolf stalker becomes weaker, and every theory about an organized operation with an architect and an operative becomes stronger. And here's the dark psychology of this case that nobody is talking about enough. The backward walker video from January 23rd was posted by a regular homeowner on the Ring Neighbors app. This is basically a social media network for local security. People post suspicious activity, stray dogs, package thieves. But in a case this calculated, there is a very high probability that the kidnapper is also on that app. He is not just a ghost in the machine. He is a subscriber. A predator who conducts a dress rehearsal 9 days in advance is obsessed with the result. He likely spent the next morning refreshing the Neighbors app feed for that zip code. He was waiting to see if anyone noticed him. He was monitoring the community chatter to measure his own invisibility. And when he saw that the video was posted but nobody could identify him, it gave him something more dangerous than luck. It gave him confirmation. The very technology we use to feel safe was weaponized as a feedback loop. He used the community's own alert network to validate his disguise, and that validation is what gave him the confidence to walk forward instead of backward 9 days later. The ransom notes were sent to TMZ and local Arizona news outlets, not to Savannah Guthrie directly, not to the family, to the media. A professional kidnapper negotiates in private. They do not invite the press into the conversation. But someone who wants to create the appearance of an outside threat, someone who wants the world to believe a stranger did this, they go to the media. Because every headline about a random kidnapper is another layer of distance between the real perpetrator and the investigation. The TMZ tipster, who first reported the ransom demand, used the phrase, the main individual. The main individual. That language implies a hierarchy. It implies more than one person. It implies that whoever contacted TMZ understood the operation had layers. And the Bitcoin wallet where the ransom was supposed to be paid? It has remained completely silent. Zero activity. The FBI sent a small amount of money to it as a trap, a digital mousetrap. They are watching that wallet around the clock, waiting for someone to log in and check the balance. The moment someone accesses it, their device sends a signal, IP address, location, device identifier, but nobody has touched it, and that tells us something critical. A professional criminal enterprise would move that money immediately. They would know how to access it anonymously. But this suspect is paralyzed. He knows it is a trap, or he is too afraid to make a move. This is the profile of someone who is educated enough to set up a Bitcoin wallet, but not experienced enough to understand how to use it safely. A science teacher. Someone who knows how things work in theory, but lacks the criminal experience to execute in practice. Now here is something that should make everyone watching uncomfortable about the bigger picture. The Today Show. Since Savannah stepped away, the show has rocketed back to #1 in ratings. It has taken a commanding lead over Good Morning America, especially in the advertiser demographic of viewers aged 25 to 50. Savannah's tragedy is NBC's best ratings period. I am not suggesting NBC has anything to do with this case, but I am pointing out that the longer this story stays in the news, the more money it generates. And the question of who benefits from a story staying alive is always worth asking, even when the answer is uncomfortable. Sources told News Nation that Savannah is considering a permanent exit from the show. She reportedly feels her mother was targeted because of her job and does not want to put her family at risk. One television executive said there is no way Savannah is coming back. There were already rumors she was considering leaving at the end of 2026. The kidnapping may have accelerated that timeline. But here is where that detail connects to the conspiracy. If Savannah leaves the Today Show, her income changes, her visibility changes, the family's financial structure changes. And whoever planned this crime did so with a very specific understanding of that financial structure. They knew what Savannah earned. They Googled it, from Tucson. Now we have to stop and be fair. Because as tightly as these coincidences coil around Tommaso Cioni and Annie Guthrie, there are facts that push back against the theory. The height. An investigative journalist who has studied public photographs of Tommaso concluded that he is notably taller than the 5'9" to 5'10" range the FBI described. If accurate, Tommaso is not the man on the porch, but that does not clear him of involvement. It clears him of being the executor. If there are two people involved, the architect and the operative do not have to be the same person. The official clearance. On February 16th, Sheriff Nanos formally cleared the entire Guthrie family. He said they were cleared in the first few days. He said they have given up their phones, computers, cars, and houses. He told the media to stop speculating and called the family victims plain and simple. But here is what most people do not understand about how investigations work. Cleared does not mean exonerated. Cleared means the current evidence does not support charging them. In high-profile investigations, clearing family members publicly is a tactical decision. It removes media pressure. It allows investigators to work without scrutiny. And critically, it can make a guilty party relax. When the sheriff goes on camera and says you are not a suspect, the natural human response is to let your guard down, to stop being careful, to make a phone call you would not have made yesterday, to check a Bitcoin wallet you have been afraid to touch. Clearing someone is not always an ending. Sometimes it is a strategy. The DNA found inside Nancy's home does not match any family member. That is significant. If Tommaso was physically present during the abduction, his DNA was not found. Either he was extraordinarily careful, which is consistent with a science teacher who understands biological evidence and how to avoid leaving it, or he was not physically there, which is consistent with the accomplice theory, or the DNA belongs to someone else entirely, which means the real answer is still sitting in a lab somewhere. And then there is the stalker theory, the possibility that a stranger with an obsessive fixation on Savannah Guthrie targeted Nancy as a proxy, a soft target, the path of least resistance to the real object of their obsession. This theory explains the ownership behavior differently, not as physical familiarity with the house, but as delusional entitlement. The suspect believed he belonged there, because in his twisted reality, he was already part of the family. It explains the ransom notes sent to the media as a cry for attention, not a demand for money. And it explains the Bitcoin silence as someone who never cared about the money in the first place. But here is what the stalker theory does not explain. It does not explain the dress rehearsal 9 days earlier. A delusional individual driven by obsession does not conduct methodical test runs at buffer zone distances. That is operational planning. It does not explain the specific knowledge of Nancy's camera system and subscription status. A stranger would not know she lacked an active Nest account. And it does not explain why FBI agents have visited the son-in-law's home at least 5 times, searched his septic tank, impounded his wife's vehicle, removed their security cameras, and carried biological evidence out in a paper bag. Megyn Kelly said it on her show. The reason they keep going back to Annie and Tommaso's house is because they are wondering if they had anything to do with it. She said she does not understand why investigators would be interviewing the neighbors over and over, asking specifically about Annie and Tommaso and what they are like, unless they are building something. So where does this leave us? On one side, a couple living 4 miles from the victim, the last people to see her alive. A 4-hour window with no public alibi. Ownership behavior on the porch. Calculated incompetence in the gear, nitrile gloves from a biology teacher's toolkit, a power of attorney signed 8 months before the crime, a bandmate with felony burglary charges, an impounded vehicle, a searched septic tank, a property value gap, a book about kidnapping games published 1 year before the real kidnapping, and a paper bag carried out of their house by federal agents. On the other side, the official position. No suspects, family cleared, DNA that does not match, a height discrepancy, and the possibility that a complete stranger studied Nancy Guthrie's home for months and arrived with a plan that fell apart the moment it made contact with reality. Right now, as you watch this video, that paper bag is almost certainly sitting in a forensic laboratory. Technicians are comparing whatever was inside it against the DNA from the glove found on the roadside, and the DNA recovered from inside Nancy's home. The genealogy databases are building family trees from partial matches. Every branch leads to more branches, and eventually those branches narrow to a name. If that name is connected to the people who had dinner with Nancy 4 hours before she disappeared, then every coincidence we just walked through was not a coincidence at all. It was a pattern. And the amateur disguise, the Walmart gear, the wrong holster, the reflective backpack, all of it was a performance designed to make us look everywhere, except at the people who already had the keys to the front door. But if that name belongs to a stranger, then Tommaso Cioni is exactly what he appears to be. A quiet science teacher from Tuscany whose life was destroyed by suspicion because he had the misfortune of being the last person to say goodnight. And Annie Guthrie is a poet whose car was impounded and whose septic tank was searched because the internet decided she was guilty before the evidence did. The DNA does not care about our theories. The DNA does not care about coincidences, or body language, or power of attorney documents, or published books about kidnapping games. The DNA will deliver a verdict that no amount of acting can hide, and we are closer to that verdict than most people realize. But before you go, think about this. The January 23rd dress rehearsal video did not just give investigators a second crime to analyze, it gave them a second date to investigate. Until that video surfaced, the entire investigation was hanging on a single 4-hour window on the night of February 1st. Any suspect only had to account for where they were between 9:50 p.m. and 2 a.m. on that specific night. If they had a sleeping spouse or a phone charging on a nightstand, they were safe. But now, the game has changed. The FBI is no longer just asking, "Where were you the night Nancy disappeared?" Now they are asking, "Where were you on January 23rd at 2 a.m.?" And this is the part that should terrify whoever did this. It is relatively easy to manufacture an alibi for the night of an actual crime. You know it is coming. You plan your defense at the same time you plan your offense. You leave your phone at home. You park your car in the driveway. You create a digital dummy. But January 23rd was a rehearsal, a random night a week before the main event. The suspect did not know he was going to be caught on camera. He did not know a dog would bark. Because he felt safe and invisible, he likely got sloppy. His personal phone was probably in his pocket. He probably drove his own registered vehicle. He did not bother creating a fake digital footprint because he did not think anyone would ever notice. The FBI is undoubtedly conducting what is known as a tower dump. They are pulling records for every cell tower covering the area 6.5 miles from Nancy's home on the night of January 23rd. They are looking for every device that connected to those towers between 1 and 3 a.m. Then, they are overlaying that list with the devices detected near Nancy's home on February 1st. They are hunting for the one phone number that appears in both data sets. If Tommaso Cioni's phone, or Annie's phone, or the phone of anyone in their circle, appears at the rehearsal site on January 23rd and near the crime scene on February 1st, there is no defense attorney in the world who can explain that away. Faking an alibi for one specific night is difficult but possible. Faking an alibi for 2 random nights separated by 9 days, without knowing that the police are looking at the first date, is impossible. The suspect might have worn a mask to hide his face, but he could not mask the signal pinging from his pocket. And right now, that signal may be the loudest witness in the entire case. So I have to turn this over to you. You have seen the evidence. You have seen the coincidences. You have heard the counter-arguments. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Do you believe this is the tragic story of a family caught in a nightmare they did not create? Or do you believe the nightmare was created from inside the family itself? Nancy Guthrie has been missing for 20 days. She has a pacemaker. She needs her medication. And somewhere, someone knows what happened on the night of January 31st. Whether that someone is a stranger in the shadows, or the people who kissed her goodnight 4 hours before she vanished, is the question that will define this case. The DNA results are coming, and when they do, we will be here to break down exactly what they mean. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. I will see you in the next update.